Mother Bear. Fell in the swimming pool of the home. What this human baby put everyone in tear. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. The gentle morning sunlight spilled over the Dawson family's backyard, casting a golden glow across their peaceful suburban sanctuary. Olivia Dawson stood at the kitchen window, cradling her 15-month-old daughter Sophia in her arms as she prepared breakfast. The swimming pool sparkled like a jewel in the sunlight, its clear blue water perfectly still in the quiet morning air. Sophia giggled and pointed toward the window, her tiny fingers pressing against the glass as if trying to touch the beautiful day outside. "Yes, sweetheart, it's a lovely morning," Olivia whispered, kissing her daughter's soft curls. She had no way of knowing that this ordinary Tuesday would soon transform into a day the entire neighborhood would remember for years to come. In the woods that bordered their property, something stirred. A massive mother bear with rich brown fur and watchful eyes cautiously emerged from the tree line. She had been separated from her cubs during the night and had wandered into this unfamiliar territory in her desperate search. Exhausted and disoriented, the bear's normally keen senses were dulled by fatigue and worry. She moved silently across the manicured lawn, drawn by the scent of water. Back inside, Olivia placed Sophia in her playpen, surrounded by colorful toys, before returning to the kitchen to finish preparing breakfast for her husband Nathan, who was still asleep upstairs. Sophia babbled happily, pushing herself up to stand against the edge of the playpen. Her innocent eyes suddenly widened as she spotted something unusual through the large bay window that overlooked the backyard. The mother bear approached the swimming pool cautiously, her powerful frame moving with surprising grace. She leaned forward, trying to drink from the clear water, unaware of the difference between a natural pond and this man-made structure. The pool's smooth edge, slick with morning dew, offered no secure footing. As the massive animal leaned further forward, her front paw slipped. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The bear's massive body lost balance, her desperate attempt to regain footing only hastening her fall. With a tremendous splash that sent water surging over the pool's edge, the mother bear plunged into the deep end of the swimming pool. Her roar of surprise and fear shattered the morning quiet, echoing through the neighborhood like a clap of thunder. Olivia froze at the kitchen counter, the sound of splashing and distressed animal cries sending a chill down her spine. She rushed to the window in time to see the enormous bear thrashing in the water, powerful paws slapping desperately against the surface as she struggled to stay afloat. The animal's eyes were wide with panic, her movements growing more frantic with each passing second. "Nathan!" Olivia screamed, her voice breaking with fear. "Nathan, wake up! There's a bear in our pool!" As the commotion grew, neighbors began to emerge from their homes, drawn by the unusual sounds. Mrs. Henderson from next door appeared at her fence line, her morning coffee forgotten in her hand. Across the street, the Carter family stood on their front lawn in pajamas, pointing and calling to others. Within minutes, a small crowd had gathered at the edge of the Dawson property, their faces a mixture of awe, fear, and concern. Inside the house, Sophia remained oddly calm amidst the growing chaos. Her bright eyes remained fixed on the struggling bear, watching with an intensity that seemed far beyond her tender age. As the adults rushed about in panic, the baby's expression showed something remarkable. Not fear, but a deep, inexplicable compassion. And it was in this moment of growing tension that something truly extraordinary was about to unfold. Something that would leave everyone who witnessed it forever changed. Nathan Dawson thundered down the stairs, his heart pounding in his chest. He had been jolted from sleep by his wife's panicked cries, and the sound of splashing water and animal growls filled him with dread. Reaching the kitchen, he pulled Olivia into his arms protectively, before looking out at the chaotic scene in their backyard. "Call animal control," he ordered, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "I'll make sure all the doors are locked." The bear continued to struggle, her massive body growing increasingly exhausted. Each desperate attempt to climb out of the pool only resulted in her sliding back into the water, her claws unable to gain purchase on the smooth walls. Her eyes, wild with panic, darted around as if searching for escape. The neighbors had begun filming with their phones, their voices a mixture of excitement and concern as they debated what to do. "Someone should help her," Mrs. Henderson called out, her weathered face creased with worry. "She's going to drown if we don't do something." "Are you crazy?" shouted Mr. Carter from across the street. "That's a wild bear. It could kill someone if it gets out." As the adults argued, little Sophia watched the scene with an intensity that seemed impossible for a child her age. Her tiny hands gripped the edge of her playpen, and she began to make distressed sounds, not of fear, but as if she somehow understood the bear's plight. She bounced up and down, pointing insistently toward the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. Olivia hung up the phone, her face pale. "Animal control says they're at least 40 minutes away," she informed Nathan, her voice trembling. "They said to stay inside and keep away from the windows." But even as they spoke, something unexpected happened. Sophia, who had only recently mastered walking on her own, somehow managed to climb out of her playpen. In the chaos of the moment, with all attention focused on the bear, no one noticed as the little girl toddled across the living room floor. With determination that seemed to defy her young age, she pushed her tiny hands against the sliding glass door that Nathan had failed to fully close in his haste. The door slid open just enough for the small child to slip through. "Oh my God!" screamed Mrs. Henderson, pointing toward the Dawsons' patio. "The baby!" "The baby is outside." Olivia turned, her face transforming from worry to absolute horror as she saw her precious daughter stepping onto the sun-warmed tiles of the patio, just 20 feet from where the massive bear continued to struggle in the pool. Time seemed to freeze as every adult present was paralyzed by the same terrible realization. A 15-month-old child was now in potential danger from a frightened, desperate, wild animal. "Sophia!" Olivia screamed, lunging for the door. Nathan caught her arm, his face ashen. "Don't run," he whispered urgently. "You might startle the bear. I'll go slowly." But before either parent could move, something happened that no one could have anticipated. The bear, exhausted from her struggle, had momentarily stopped thrashing. Her dark eyes, intelligent and afraid, fixed on the tiny human that had appeared at the edge of the pool. For a breathless moment, predator and child regarded one another in a silence that seemed to stretch into eternity. Then, Sophia did something that would be recounted in hushed, wonder-filled voices for years afterward. She sat down on the edge of the patio and began to hum, a soft, gentle lullaby that Olivia sang to her each night before bed. The simple melody, carried on the morning breeze, drifted across the water toward the struggling animal. The bear grew still, her panicked movement ceasing as the child's innocent voice reached her. Her massive head tilted slightly, ears twitching forward to catch the sound. The crowd of neighbors fell silent, many of them clutching each other in fear for the child's safety. Inside the house, Olivia and Nathan stood frozen, terrified to make any sudden movement that might break whatever spell had momentarily calmed the wild animal. Tears streamed down Olivia's face as she watched her baby sitting so close to danger, yet somehow seeming completely unafraid. "What is she doing?" whispered a neighbor, voice barely audible. The answer came in a moment that none of them would ever forget. Sophia stopped humming and looked directly at the bear. Then, with the innocent confidence that only a child could possess, she extended her small hand toward the animal and said her first complete sentence, "Be okay, bear, be okay." A collective gasp rose from the onlookers. In the pool, the mother bear had ceased all struggling, her eyes locked with the child's in what appeared to be a silent communication that transcended species. The massive creature's breathing slowed, and something like recognition flickered in her dark gaze. At that moment, a new sound broke the stillness, the distant cry of bear cubs from the woods beyond the property. The mother bear's head jerked toward the sound, a low moan escaping her throat. It was a sound of longing, of maternal desperation that every parent present understood on a primal level. Sophia turned her head toward the sound as well, then looked back at the bear. Impossibly, unbelievably, the child seemed to understand. She pointed toward the woods and said again, "Be okay, bear. Babies need you." From the edge of the property, a new figure appeared. Dr. James Wilson, the neighborhood veterinarian who lived 3 houses down, had arrived with a tranquilizer gun borrowed from his clinic. He assessed the situation quickly, his experienced eyes moving from the bear to the child and back again. "Everyone, stay absolutely still," he commanded in a low, authoritative voice. "I can help the bear, but we need to get the child inside first." But before anyone could act on his words, an even more unexpected twist occurred. The bear, seeming to gather her remaining strength, made one final, powerful attempt to escape the pool. Her massive paws found purchase on the underwater steps at the shallow end, steps she had missed in her panic until now. With tremendous effort, she hauled her soaking body up and out of the water. A terrified scream rippled through the crowd of neighbors. Olivia felt her heart stop as she watched the enormous predator, now free from the pool, standing less than 15 feet from her defenseless child. Nathan made a desperate move toward the door, but Dr. Wilson's voice stopped him. "Don't move," the veterinarian hissed. "Any sudden movement could trigger an attack." Time seemed suspended as the massive bear shook herself, water flying from her thick fur. Then she turned her attention fully to little Sophia, who remained seated on the patio, watching the animal with fascination rather than fear. The bear took one lumbering step toward the child, then another. Olivia bit back a scream, her entire body trembling with maternal terror. Nathan's fingers dug into the doorframe so hard that his knuckles turned white. Every person present held their breath, many silently praying or closing their eyes, unable to watch what might happen next. The bear stopped just a few feet from Sophia and lowered her massive head until she was almost eye level with the child. For a heartbreaking moment, predator and innocent regarded each other with a curiosity that defied all natural laws. Then, in a gesture that would be recounted with tears for decades to come, the bear gently huffed a warm breath that ruffled Sophia's curls. The child giggled, completely unafraid, and reached out one tiny hand toward the massive creature's wet nose. "No," Olivia whispered, too terrified to even scream. But instead of harm, the bear simply allowed the small human hand to touch the tip of her nose for the briefest of moments. Then, with a gentle grunt, she turned away from the child and lumbered toward the woods, drawn by the continuing cries of her cubs. At the edge of the property, she paused and looked back once, her eyes finding Sophia again, as if in silent acknowledgement, before disappearing into the trees. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, as if a spell had been broken, chaos erupted. Olivia burst through the door and swept Sophia into her arms, sobbing uncontrollably as she checked her daughter for any sign of injury. Nathan fell to his knees beside them, his strong arms encircling both his wife and child as tears streamed down his face. Around them, neighbors alternated between cheers of relief and shocked exclamations, many wiping away tears of their own. Dr. Wilson approached slowly, his tranquilizer gun now hanging limply at his side. "In 30 years of veterinary practice," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I have never seen anything like that. That child, your daughter, she somehow connected with that bear in a way that defies explanation." Mrs. Henderson pushed her way through the crowd, her weathered face streaked with tears. "It's a miracle," she declared, crossing herself. "That's what it is, a pure miracle." As the initial shock began to wear off, the Dawsons carried Sophia back inside, where Olivia clung to her daughter, still trembling with the fear of what might have happened. "How did you get out of your playpen, sweetheart?" she asked, brushing Sophia's curls away from her forehead. "You've never climbed out before." Sophia simply smiled and pointed toward the window where the bear had been. "Bear sad," she said simply. "Bear scared, like me when thunder." Nathan and Olivia exchanged stunned glances. Their daughter rarely spoke more than single words, yet here she was, expressing empathy for a wild animal in the clearest terms a child her age could manage. "She understood," whispered Nathan, awe in his voice. Somehow, she understood that the bear was afraid, just like she gets during thunderstorms. News of the extraordinary event spread quickly through the neighborhood, then the town, and soon media vans began appearing on the street. Wildlife authorities arrived to ensure the bear and her cubs were safely back in their territory, and reporters clamored for interviews with the family whose toddler had seemingly communicated with a wild bear. That evening, as the neighborhood finally quieted and the excitement began to die down, the Dawson family gathered in their living room, still processing the day's events. Sophia played contentedly with her toys, seemingly unaffected by her close encounter with a dangerous predator. Occasionally, she would look up toward the window and smile, as if remembering a friend. A knock at the door revealed Mrs. Henderson holding a small, wrapped package. "For the little miracle worker," she said, handing the gift to Olivia. "It's a children's book about bears. I thought, well, after today it seemed appropriate." As Olivia thanked her, the elderly woman leaned closer and said in a hushed tone, "You know, my grandmother used to tell stories about special children, ones who could speak to animals. In the old country, they were considered blessed." Later that night, as Olivia rocked Sophia to sleep, she couldn't help but wonder about the deeper meaning of what had transpired. How had her 15-month-old daughter known exactly what to do to calm a terrified wild animal? How had she understood the bear's distress when even the adults present had seen only danger? "You're a special little girl, aren't you?" she whispered, kissing Sophia's forehead as the child drifted off to sleep. "You saw past the fear to the heart of things." Over the following days, wildlife experts and animal behaviorists called the Dawson home, eager to study what they termed an unprecedented case of interspecies communication. Child psychologists suggested that Sophia's lack of learned fear might have allowed her to connect with the bear on a primal, emotional level that adults had long since lost. But perhaps the most profound impact was on the neighborhood itself. People who had lived side by side for years, without more than passing acknowledgement, now gathered for community meetings to discuss the preservation of the wooded areas where the bear and her cubs lived. Children asked their parents thoughtful questions about animals and their feelings. Something fundamental had shifted in how they viewed their relationship with the natural world around them. 1 week after the incident, the Dawsons received a special visitor. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a renowned expert in animal behavior from the State University, came to meet Sophia and discuss what had happened. After spending an hour observing the child at play and talking with the parents, she sat back with a thoughtful expression. "What we witnessed here goes beyond science as we currently understand it," she admitted. "But throughout human history, there have been accounts of special connections between children and animals, moments when the barriers between species seem to dissolve, revealing a deeper understanding." "Do you think Sophia is different?" Olivia asked hesitantly, both proud and concerned for her daughter. Dr. Martinez smiled gently. "I think all children begin life with an openness that we adults lose over time. Sophia simply hasn't learned to fear what she doesn't understand. Instead, she recognized something familiar, the fear in the bear's eyes, and responded with compassion rather than her own fear." The scientist paused, watching as Sophia carefully arranged her stuffed animals in a circle. "The question isn't whether Sophia is different. The question is why the rest of us can't see the world the way she does." That evening, as the sun set over their backyard, Nathan stood with his arm around Olivia's shoulders, watching as their daughter played safely inside. The swimming pool, now covered with a newly purchased safety cover, reflected the golden light of sunset. "I keep thinking about what Dr. Martinez said," Olivia murmured, "about how Sophia sees the world differently than we do." Nathan nodded, his eyes never leaving his daughter. Maybe that's what touched everyone so deeply. For a moment, through Sophia's eyes, we all remembered what it was like to see past differences and connect on the most basic level. One living being, recognizing the fear in another and offering comfort. From the woods beyond their property came the distant sound of rustling leaves. Though they couldn't see her, the Dawsons somehow knew that the mother bear was there with her cubs, perhaps drawn back to the place where an unexpected connection had formed. For a brief moment, it seemed as if the boundary between the human world and the wild had thinned, allowing a glimpse of something profound and rarely seen. The universal language of compassion that transcends species, age, and even words. And in that moment, as they watched their extraordinary ordinary child, Olivia and Nathan understood the true miracle they had witnessed. Not that a bear had spared their daughter, but that their daughter had reminded them all of the capacity for empathy that exists in every heart, waiting only to be awakened by innocence, unbound by fear. In the months that followed, the story of Sophia and the bear spread far beyond their small community. People from around the country sent letters and drawings, many sharing their own stories of unexpected connections with animals. A children's book author even created a beautifully illustrated story based on the event, with proceeds going to wildlife conservation. But for the Dawson family, the most precious outcome was much more personal. Each night, as they tucked Sophia into bed, they would ask her what she had learned that day, and each night she would smile sleepily and repeat the simple wisdom that had touched the hearts of everyone who heard her story. Be kind when scared. Help others home. It was a lesson that had brought an entire community to tears and changed them forever. 3 years passed. Sophia had grown from a toddler into a bright, curious 4-year-old with golden curls and eyes that seemed to hold wisdom beyond her years. The story of her encounter with the bear had faded from headlines, but in their community, it remained a powerful reminder of something extraordinary they had witnessed together. The Dawsons had transformed their backyard into a more natural space, replacing much of their manicured lawn with native plants that attracted butterflies and birds. The swimming pool remained, but was now surrounded by a secure fence, a precaution Nathan had insisted upon after that fateful day. Every evening, Sophia would stand at the edge of their property, looking out toward the woods with an expression of quiet contemplation that sometimes made Olivia wonder what thoughts moved behind those innocent eyes. On a warm Sunday afternoon in early spring, The family was enjoying a picnic in their backyard when Sophia suddenly stood up, her sandwich forgotten on her plate. "She's back," the child said simply, pointing toward the tree line. Nathan and Olivia exchanged puzzled glances. "Who's back, sweetheart?" Olivia asked, following her daughter's gaze but seeing nothing among the trees. "The mama bear," Sophia replied with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "She wants to show me something." Before either parent could respond, a rustling sound came from the underbrush at the edge of their property. Olivia reached protectively for Sophia, her heart suddenly racing with memories of terror and wonder. Nathan rose to his feet, stepping instinctively between his family and whatever approached. From the shadows of the woods emerged a large brown bear, unmistakably the same one from 3 years before, though her coat had grown lighter with age, but this time she was not alone. 2 smaller bears flanked her, nearly full-grown, but still clearly her offspring. "Oh my God," whispered Olivia, pulling Sophia close. "Nathan, call Dr. Wilson." But Sophia wiggled free from her mother's grasp. "No, Mommy, it's okay, she's just saying thank you." The mother bear stood at the edge of the property, her powerful body perfectly still. Her cubs paced nervously behind her, clearly uncomfortable with their proximity to humans, but the mother remained calm, her intelligent eyes fixed on the little girl who had once shown her kindness. Neighbors began to notice the bear's presence, and soon a small crowd had gathered once again, maintaining a respectful distance but drawn by the uncanny sense that they were witnessing a continuation of the extraordinary event from years before. "She shouldn't be here, Doctor," Wilson murmured, having arrived quickly after Nathan's call. Bears almost never return to human habitations after being scared off. This defies everything we know about their behavior. Yet there she stood, the same bear who had once fallen into their pool, now deliberately approaching the boundary between wilderness and civilization. And most remarkably, she had brought her now-grown cubs, as if to show them something important, or someone. "She remembers," Sophia said confidently, looking up at the adults surrounding her. "She remembers I helped her." The gathered neighbors watched in awestruck silence as the mother bear sat down just at the edge of the woods, her massive body settling onto the ground in a posture that could only be described as peaceful. Her cubs, following her lead but clearly nervous, sat behind her. "It's like she's introducing her family," Mrs. Henderson whispered, her aged voice trembling with emotion. Dr. Martinez, who had remained in contact with the Dawsons over the years and happened to be visiting that weekend, shook her head in amazement. "This goes against every established understanding of bear behavior," she said quietly. "Bears don't form lasting bonds with humans. They don't remember faces or return to thank someone. And yet..." As if to further challenge scientific understanding, the mother bear then did something even more unexpected. She turned to her cubs and made a soft grunting sound. One of the younger bears hesitantly moved forward and dropped something from its mouth onto the ground before quickly retreating behind its mother. "What is that?" Nathan asked, squinting to see. Dr. Wilson lifted his binoculars. "It looks like... I can't believe this. It's a honeycomb." "A gift," Sophia said matter-of-factly. "Because I gave her a gift, too. I helped her find her babies." The gathered crowd fell into a stunned silence. It was impossible, irrational, contrary to everything known about wild animal behavior. And yet they were all witnessing it. A wild bear that had returned after 3 years, bringing her grown cubs to meet the human child who had helped her, and offering what could only be interpreted as a gesture of gratitude. "Sophia," Olivia said carefully, kneeling beside her daughter, "how do you know these things? How do you understand what the bear is thinking?" Sophia tilted her head, considering the question with the straightforward simplicity of childhood. I just listen with my heart, not my ears, she explained. Don't you hear them too, Mommy? The question hung in the air, challenging the adults present to reconsider everything they thought they knew about communication, about the barriers between species, about the limitations they had accepted as immutable facts of life. Dr. Martinez knelt down beside Sophia. What are they saying now? She asked gently, her scientific skepticism momentarily set aside in the face of what she was witnessing. Sophia looked back toward the bears, her expression thoughtful. The mama is telling her babies that not all humans are scary. Some humans have kind hearts. She paused, her small face growing serious. But she's also saying goodbye. They have to move deeper into the forest because more houses are being built. They won't find enough food here anymore. A painful silence fell over the gathered neighbors. Everyone knew about the new development project that had recently broken ground just a mile from their community. A luxury housing complex that would clear another 50 acres of woodland. Mrs. Henderson was the first to speak, her voice cracking with emotion. We can't let that happen. This is their home, too. Mr. Carter, who had once advocated leaving the drowning bear to her fate, now stepped forward. My brother's on the town council. If we organized a petition, got enough people involved. As the adults began to discuss possibilities, a new connection was forming. The mother bear rose to her feet and, with deliberate slowness, approached closer than she had yet dared. She stopped just 30 feet from where Sophia stood, then lowered her massive head in what looked remarkably like a bow. Without hesitation or fear, Sophia mirrored the gesture, bowing her small head in return. Then, with a soft grunt to her cubs, the mother bear turned and led her family back into the depths of the forest, disappearing among the trees as quietly as they had appeared. The neighborhood erupted into action in the days that followed. What had begun as an extraordinary encounter between a child and a wild animal had catalyzed something unexpected, a community's awakening to their responsibility toward the natural world around them. The Save Riverside Woods campaign, as it came to be known, spread rapidly. Local media, remembering the story of Sophia and the bear from years earlier, eagerly covered the new development. Environmental groups offered support and expertise. Hundreds of signatures were gathered on petitions, and town council meetings overflowed with concerned citizens. And at the center of it all, though she was too young to fully understand the political implications, was Sophia. Her simple, heartfelt statements about the bears needing their home carried more emotional weight than any scientific argument or economic analysis. If we take away their home, she said during one community meeting, her small voice somehow silencing the room filled with adults, where will they go? Everyone needs a home. 3 months of intense campaigning followed. The development company initially dismissed the opposition, citing economic benefits and job creation. But as public pressure mounted and alternative proposals emerged for more sustainable, limited development that would preserve critical wildlife corridors, the conversation began to shift. The turning point came when Sophia, accompanied by her parents and Dr. Martinez, was invited to appear on a regional news program. The interviewer, clearly expecting cute, rehearsed answers from the child, was unprepared for the wisdom that flowed from her. The bears and the deer and the birds were here first, Sophia explained simply. This was their home before it was our home. My daddy taught me that when you share something, you have to be fair. The video clip went viral, touching hearts far beyond their small community. Letters of support poured in from around the country. Environmental organizations offered legal support. And finally, after weeks of negotiation, The development company announced a revised plan that would preserve 70% of the woodland and create a protected wildlife corridor. It was a victory that few had believed possible, born from the unlikely connection between a child and a wild bear. On the evening after the announcement, the Dawson family sat on their back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink above the woods that would now remain standing. "I've been thinking," Nathan said quietly, his arm around Olivia's shoulders, "about how one small moment can change everything." Olivia nodded, watching as Sophia arranged pine cones and acorns she had collected into careful patterns on the porch floor. If that bear hadn't fallen into our pool that day. Or if Sophia hadn't somehow known exactly what to do, Nathan continued, the whole course of our lives and this community would be different. Dr. Martinez, who had stopped by to celebrate the victory with them, smiled thoughtfully. There's a concept in chaos theory called the butterfly effect, the idea that tiny changes can have enormous consequences down the line. A butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil, and eventually it causes a tornado in Texas. Or a baby hums to a bear and eventually saves a forest, Olivia added softly. As darkness settled over their backyard, Sophia climbed into her father's lap, her small face serious in the fading light. "Daddy," she asked, "do you think the bears know their home is safe now?" Nathan hugged his daughter close, his throat tight with emotion. "I think they do, sweetheart. Somehow, I think they do." Later that night, after Sophia had been tucked into bed, Nathan found Olivia standing by their daughter's bedroom window, looking out toward the darkened woods beyond their property. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, slipping his arms around her waist. Olivia leaned back against him, taking comfort in his strength. "I'm thinking about what Sophia said years ago, about listening with her heart, not her ears. What if that's not just a child's imagination, Nathan? What if it's something real that we've all forgotten how to do?" Before Nathan could respond, a sound drifted through the night air. A distant, rumbling call that they both recognized immediately as a bear's vocalizing. It was answered moments later by another call, and then another, the voices of a family communicating in the darkness. And in her bed, though her parents couldn't see it, Sophia smiled in her sleep. The story of the girl and the bear didn't end there. As Sophia grew, her extraordinary connection with animals remained, though it evolved into something more subtle than the dramatic encounters of her early childhood. By the time she was 7, she had become something of a local legend. The girl who could calm frightened dogs with a glance, who could sit perfectly still in the garden until wild birds would eat from her open palm, who seemed to know when injured animals were hiding nearby, leading adults to help them. Her parents had worried initially about how such attention might affect their daughter, but Sophia remained remarkably grounded, accepting her unique sensitivity as naturally as she accepted having brown eyes or curly hair. It was simply part of who she was. What did change, profoundly, was the community around them. The successful campaign to protect the woodland had awakened something in the neighborhood, a sense of shared purpose and connection to the natural world that had been dormant for generations. Mrs. Henderson, now approaching 80, started a community garden where she taught children about native plants and the importance of pollinators. Mr. Carter, once the most vocal advocate for dealing with any wildlife that ventured near homes, now led monthly nature walks through the preserved woodland, teaching neighbors about the inhabitants of the forest. The Dawsons' home became an unofficial wildlife rehabilitation center, with Olivia obtaining proper training and permits to care for injured animals before their release back into the wild. On Sophia's 8th birthday, the family received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Rebecca Martinez arrived with a special birthday gift and news that would change their lives once again. "I've been awarded a research grant," she explained, as Sophia unwrapped the beautifully illustrated book on animal communication, "to study cases like Sophia's, children who demonstrate unusual connections with animals. There have been documented instances throughout history and across cultures, but they've never been systematically researched with modern methods." "You want to study our daughter?" Olivia asked, her protective instincts immediately flaring. Dr. Martinez shook her head. "Not exactly. I want your family to join our research team. We'll be traveling to different regions around the world, meeting with indigenous communities where such connections are honored rather than dismissed, learning from their traditions while documenting with scientific rigor." Nathan and Olivia exchanged glances, a wordless communication born of years together. "We couldn't possibly," Nathan began. "I've thought of that, Doctor," Martinez continued. "The grant includes provisions for a teaching specialist to travel with us, ensuring Sophia's education continues. And the experience itself, learning from cultures that have maintained harmonious relationships with the natural world for thousands of years, would be an education beyond anything a traditional classroom could provide." Sophia, who had been quietly listening to the adults talk, suddenly spoke up. "The bears would miss us," she said thoughtfully. "But maybe we could learn things that would help them even more when we come home." And so, 6 months later, the Dawson family embarked on an extraordinary journey from the rainforests of Costa Rica, where they learned from indigenous guides who could track animals through dense jungle, using subtle signs invisible to untrained eyes, to the steppes of Mongolia, where eagle hunters maintained ancient traditions of partnership with birds of prey. In northern Canada, they spent time with Inuit communities who spoke of the importance of respecting the spirits of the animals they hunted. In Tanzania, they witnessed the Maasai's deep understanding of the savanna ecosystem and its inhabitants. Throughout their travels, Dr. Martinez carefully documented Sophia's interactions with animals in diverse environments, gathering evidence of something that defied easy scientific explanation but couldn't be dismissed as mere coincidence or imagination. Other children with similar gifts were identified, studied with respect and care, their abilities compared and contrasted. Patterns began to emerge, common elements that transcended cultural differences. Children who possessed this unusual sensitivity often displayed it before they could speak. They showed extraordinary empathy not just toward animals but toward other people as well. Most had experienced a significant encounter with a wild animal at a young age, much like Sophia's meeting with the bear. And perhaps most intriguingly, in every culture they visited, there were ancient traditions that recognized such children as specially gifted, as bridges between the human and natural worlds, their abilities not dismissed as fantasy but honored as valuable to the community's survival and harmony with their environment. 2 years into their journey, the research team was in the remote mountains of Japan, living with a small community that maintained ancient traditions of coexistence with the natural world. There, 10-year-old Sophia met 93-year-old Hana Takahashi, who had been recognized in her childhood for having the same gift. The elderly woman took Sophia's hands in her own gnarled ones and spoke softly in Japanese, which Dr. Martinez translated. "She says she has been waiting for you. She says that in her lifetime, people have forgotten how to listen to the voice of the forest and its creatures, but that children like you are being born now because the animals are crying out more desperately than ever before." Tears filled Sophia's eyes, though she couldn't have explained why. "Ask her how I can help," she whispered. The old woman's answer, when translated, was both simple and profound. Tell their stories. Help others remember how to listen with their hearts. On their last night in the mountains after Sophia had gone to bed, Olivia found Dr. Martinez sitting alone, reviewing her extensive notes by the light of a small lamp. "Have you found what you were looking for?" Olivia asked quietly, sitting beside the scientist who had become a dear friend over their years of travel. Dr. Martinez looked up, her expression thoughtful. "I set out to study a phenomenon through the lens of science, to measure and quantify and explain. But I'm beginning to think what we're witnessing goes beyond what our current scientific framework can fully capture." "What do you mean?" "Every culture we've visited has a different name for what Sophia can do. Animal whispering, spirit speaking, heart listening, but they all recognize it as real. Not as imagination or coincidence, but as a genuine form of communication that most adults have lost." She closed her notebook slowly. "What if the most rational conclusion isn't that these cultures are all maintaining the same superstition, but that they're all recognizing the same truth? A truth our modern society has forgotten." Later that night, unable to sleep, Olivia stepped outside their small traditional house to look at the stars. The mountain air was crisp, the sky ablaze with more stars than were ever visible back home. In the distance, she heard the haunting call of a fox, then another answering. A small voice spoke beside her, startling her. "They're talking about us," Sophia said, having followed her mother outside. "They're curious about the humans who are leaving tomorrow." Olivia looked down at her daughter, this child who had changed not only their lives, but an entire community, and who was now part of research that might eventually change how humans understood their relationship with the natural world. "What will you miss most when we go home?" she asked, pulling Sophia close against the chill. Sophia considered the question seriously, as she did all questions. "Nothing," she finally answered, "because I'm taking all the important parts with me, in here." She touched her chest over her heart. "And I'm going to teach everyone who wants to learn." A month later, the Dawson family returned to their home, changed in profound ways by their experiences. The preserved woodland behind their property seemed more precious than ever, the community they had helped build more significant. They found that in their absence, the Save Riverside Woods initiative had grown into a broader conservation movement that had successfully protected several other natural areas in the region. Mrs. Henderson, despite her advancing age, had established a thriving educational program that brought schoolchildren into the woods to learn about local ecosystems. And most remarkably, the development company that had initially planned to clear the forest had become a partner in creating sustainable housing that worked with, rather than against, the natural environment. On their first night home, as darkness fell, Sophia stood at the edge of their backyard, looking out toward the woods. Her parents watched from the porch, giving her the space they now understood she sometimes needed. After several minutes, Sophia turned back to them, her face alight with joy in the gathering dusk. "They're still here," she called softly. "The Bear family, they remembered us." Nathan and Olivia exchanged glances, no longer questioning their daughter's certainty about such things. "Are they all right?" Olivia asked. Sophia nodded. "They're happy. The forest is healthier now because of the protections. More food, more space." She paused, listening to something only she could hear. "And she wants me to tell you thank you. Not just from her family, but from all of them." As they tucked Sophia into her bed that night, in the room that had seemed so small to her after 2 years of traveling the world, Nathan sat on the edge of the mattress. "You've learned so much on our journey," he said. "What do you think is the most important thing you discovered?" Sophia didn't hesitate. "That everyone and everything is connected," she replied, her young voice filled with a wisdom that still sometimes took her parents by surprise. "And that listening is the most important thing we can do, listening with our whole hearts, not just our ears." "And what will you do with everything you've learned?" Olivia asked, smoothing her daughter's curls away from her forehead. Sophia smiled, her eyes already growing heavy with sleep. "I'm going to teach others how to listen," she murmured. "Because when you really listen, you can't help but care. And when you care, you protect what's important." As their daughter drifted off to sleep, Nathan and Olivia stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the dark outline of the forest against the night sky. Somewhere out there, a family of bears was also settling down for the night. Their existence and the Dawsons now inextricably linked by an extraordinary moment of connection that had rippled outward, touching countless lives and changing the course of an entire community. "Do you think the world is ready to listen?" Nathan asked softly, his arm around his wife's shoulders. Olivia leaned against him, drawing strength from his presence as she had throughout their remarkable journey. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I know that Sophia will keep reminding us how, for as long as it takes." From the woods came the distant call of a mother bear, carried on the night breeze, a sound that would have once filled them with fear, but now brought only a sense of profound connection. And beside them, their extraordinary ordinary daughter smiled in her sleep, already dreaming of the next chapter in a story that had begun with a single moment of fear, transformed by the purest form of compassion. A story that had put everyone in tears, and, in doing so, had opened their hearts to hear what had always been there, waiting to be understood. 6 years passed. Sophia Dawson was now 16, a thoughtful teenager whose childhood connection with animals had evolved into a purposeful mission. The quiet suburban home where a bear had once fallen into a swimming pool had become a sanctuary, both for wildlife and for people seeking to understand their relationship with the natural world. The Dawson Wildlife Education Center, as it was now formally known, occupied the original house and 5 adjoining acres that the family had purchased with proceeds from Dr. Martinez's book, The Language of Compassion: How Children Reconnect Us with the Natural World. The swimming pool had been transformed into a natural pond, surrounded by native vegetation that attracted butterflies, birds, and small mammals. In place of manicured lawns, meadows of wildflowers stretched toward the protected woodland, creating a transition zone where humans could observe the wildlife safely. On this particular autumn afternoon, Sophia stood before a group of elementary school children who sat cross-legged on the ground, their faces upturned and eager. At 16, she had grown tall like her father. Her once golden curls darkened to honey brown, but her eyes retained that same quality of quiet wisdom that had marked her since childhood. "Before we go into the woods today," she was saying, her voice gentle but carrying naturally across the circle, "I want you to remember the 3 promises we make when we enter someone else's home." The children responded in unison, voices raised in the sing-song rhythm of a practiced recitation. "We promise to listen more than we speak. We promise to respect all living things we meet. We promise to leave only footprints and take only memories." Sophia smiled, her heart warming at their earnest faces. Many of these children were too young to know the full story of her encounter with the bear, how it had transformed not just her family, but an entire community's relationship with the wildlife around them. To them, she was simply Miss Sophia, the teenager who could somehow always spot the camouflaged tree frog or know exactly where the fox den was located. As she led the children toward the forest path, Sophia felt a familiar prickling sensation at the back of her neck, the awareness of being watched. Glancing toward the tree line, she caught a glimpse of movement that most humans would have missed, the dark shape of a large animal observing from a distance. "Miss Rivera," she called softly to the teacher supervising the field trip. "Could you take the lead for a moment? I need to check something." The teacher nodded, well accustomed to Sophia's occasional detours during these educational walks. As the children continued along the path with their teacher, Sophia stepped off the trail and moved quietly toward the place where she had sensed the presence. "Hello, old friend," she whispered as she approached a thicket of dense undergrowth. From the shadows emerged the mother bear, now elderly by bear standards, her muzzle grayed and her movements slower than they had once been. Throughout the years, their paths had crossed periodically, never with danger, always with a sense of mutual recognition that defied scientific explanation. Dr. Martinez had documented these encounters extensively, though she was careful to ensure that Sophia's privacy was protected, referring to her in published papers only as Subject S. The bear huffed softly, a sound that Sophia had come to understand as acknowledgement. But today, something was different. The animal's eyes held a distress that Sophia immediately sensed. "What's wrong?" she asked, kneeling to bring herself closer to eye level, maintaining the respectful distance they had established over years of these extraordinary meetings. The bear made a low moaning sound, then turned her head toward the deeper forest. Sophia felt a familiar sensation, not words exactly, but impressions and emotions that formed a kind of understanding in her mind. Something was wrong in the forest. Something that concerned not just this bear, but all the creatures who called the woodland home. "Show me," Sophia said simply. The bear turned and began moving slowly into the forest, pausing occasionally to look back, ensuring that Sophia was following. This was unprecedented in their years of encounters. Never before had the bear actively led her anywhere. Sophia quickly texted her mother, following the mother bear deeper into woods. "She's trying to show me something important. Don't worry, we'll stay safe. Tell Miss Rivera I'll catch up with the group later." Then, tucking her phone back into her pocket, she followed the aging bear into parts of the forest she rarely visited, beyond the well-maintained trails, beyond the areas mapped for the education center's nature walks. After 20 minutes of careful navigation through increasingly dense undergrowth, they reached a small creek. The bear stopped, sniffing the air anxiously, then looked pointedly at the water. Sophia knelt beside the stream, immediately noticing something unusual. The clear water carried a faint oily sheen, and an odor that didn't belong in a pristine woodland creek. Something chemical and harsh. Taking out her phone, she began documenting, taking photos of the water and using a small collapsible cup from her backpack to collect a sample. As she worked, the bear watched with what could only be described as approval, occasionally making soft sounds that Sophia felt rather than heard, urging her to understand the severity of the problem. "This doesn't belong here," Sophia said aloud, as much to herself as to the bear. "Something's contaminating the water upstream. I promise you, we'll find out what it is." The bear huffed again, then indicated with her massive head that Sophia should follow further. Another 10 minutes of hiking brought them to a place where the creek widened, forming a small pond where the water eddied and swirled before continuing its journey. Here, the contamination was more evident. A filmy, rainbow-colored slick on the surface, and most distressingly, the still forms of several fish floating lifeless in the shallow edges. Sophia's heart sank as she documented this scene as well. The bear made a mournful sound, nudging one of the dead fish with her snout. "This is why you came to find me," Sophia said softly, understanding flooding through her. "Your family needs this water. All the forest creatures do." The bear looked directly into her eyes, and in that moment, Sophia felt a wave of emotion so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. Trust, concern, and something that felt remarkably like hope. After all these years, the bear still believed in her, still knew Sophia would try to help, when others might not even notice the problem. "I'll fix this," she promised, her voice thick with emotion. "Just like before. I won't let this poison your home." The bear huffed softly one last time, then turned and disappeared into the forest. Her mission accomplished. She had shown the human what needed to be seen. Now it was up to Sophia to do what needed to be done. When Sophia returned to the education center that afternoon, she immediately sought out her parents and Dr. Martinez, who was visiting for the week to collect data for her ongoing research. The water samples and photographs sparked immediate concern. "This looks like industrial runoff," Nathan said grimly, examining the samples under the center's microscope. "But there aren't any factories upstream from our preserve." "Actually, there's something you should know," Dr. Martinez said, her expression troubled. "I was going to discuss this with you tonight. Westridge Chemical has purchased land about 2 miles upstream. They've been very quiet about it, but they're planning a new research facility." Olivia's face paled. "Westridge? But they have a terrible environmental record. Their plant in Arizona was fined millions for contaminating groundwater. And they're already polluting the creek," Sophia said firmly, pointing to the evidence she had collected. "The bear showed me, because this affects her family directly. This creek is the main water source for wildlife in this part of the forest." Dr. Martinez nodded thoughtfully. "The timing makes sense. They would have started site preparation, clearing trees, bringing in heavy equipment. If they're careless with their waste disposal or if there's runoff from the construction." "We need to act immediately," Nathan said, already reaching for his phone. "I'll call the Environmental Protection Agency and the State Wildlife Department. And I'll contact Linda Chen at the Tribune," Olivia added. "She covered our original conservation campaign. She'll understand the importance of this." But Sophia was already shaking her head. "That's not enough," she said quietly. "Government investigations take too long. By the time they act, irreversible damage could be done." "What are you suggesting?" Dr. Martinez asked, studying the teenager's determined expression. "The same thing that worked when I was a child," Sophia replied, a plan already forming in her mind. "We need to tell a story that people can't ignore, a story that makes them feel what's at stake." Within 48 hours, Sophia's bedroom had been transformed into an impromptu command center. Maps of the watershed were pinned to the walls. Water sample results were charted on her computer, and a small group of her closest friends, all members of the high school's environmental club, huddled around her desk, planning what they had begun calling Operation Clearwater. "We need concrete evidence," said Marcus Chen, the son of the Tribune journalist who had covered the original bear story. At 17, he had inherited his mother's investigative instincts and had already published several articles in the school newspaper about environmental issues. Photos of them actually dumping or mishandling chemicals, not just the results downstream. "And we need to document the impact on wildlife," added Emily Rodriguez, whose passion for biology had been inspired by growing up hearing the legend of Sophia and the bear. "Dead fish aren't enough. We need to show which species are affected and how." "What we really need," said Sophia, tapping her pencil thoughtfully against the desk, "is to live stream the evidence so they can't deny it or cover it up once they realize they're being watched." "You're talking about trespassing on corporate property," Dr. Martinez cautioned, having joined the meeting as an advisor. "That could have serious legal consequences." "Not if we stay on public land," Marcus replied, pointing to the map. "The creek itself and a narrow corridor along it are considered public waterways. We need to use drones to document what's happening without physically entering their property." As they debated strategies, Sophia's phone buzzed with a text message from Mrs. Henderson. Bear spotted at edge of property, looking agitated. Thought you should know. I have to go, Sophia said abruptly, standing up. Keep working on the plan. I'll be back soon. She found the elderly bear pacing anxiously at the forest's edge, far closer to human habitation than she would normally venture. When she saw Sophia, she made a deep, urgent sound that needed no translation. Something's happened, Sophia said, feeling the bear's distress flooding through her. Show me. This time, their journey through the forest was faster, more urgent. The bear moved with surprising speed despite her age, leading Sophia directly back to the contaminated pond they had visited 2 days earlier. What they found there made Sophia's heart sink. One of the bear's grown cubs, now a massive adult bear in his own right, lay beside the water, his breathing labored, his body trembling with what appeared to be seizures. Near him lay the still forms of 2 raccoons and a fox, already dead. No, Sophia whispered, tears filling her eyes as she understood the terrible truth. The contamination was spreading, its effects growing deadlier, and the animals were drinking from the poisoned water, having no way to know the danger it posed. The mother bear made a grief-stricken sound, moving to nuzzle her suffering offspring. The male bear's eyes were glazed with pain, his massive body racked with tremors. Sophia knew she couldn't approach. A sick, suffering bear was unpredictable and dangerous, even one connected to her family through years of extraordinary encounters. Instead, she did the only thing she could. She called for help. Within an hour, the pond had become the site of an emergency response. Dr. Wilson, now in his 70s but still the community's trusted veterinarian, had arrived with tranquilizer equipment and emergency medical supplies. The state wildlife officials, long familiar with the unusual relationship between the Dawson family and the local bear population, had dispatched a team with a transport vehicle. Nathan and Olivia worked alongside them, setting up a perimeter to keep curious onlookers away. Throughout it all, the mother bear remained beside her suffering cub, occasionally looking toward Sophia with eyes that seemed to hold both accusation and plea. Why haven't you fixed this yet? When will you make it stop? As the wildlife officials prepared to tranquilize the sick bear for transport to a specialized facility, Sophia made a decision. Pulling Marcus aside, she spoke urgently. We can't wait any longer. We need to expose what's happening right now. Marcus nodded, understanding immediately. I've got the drone in my car. Emily has the water testing kits. We can go upstream and document the source today. No, Sophia shook her head. I have a better idea. We bring the story here, now, while it's happening. Your mom's a journalist. Call her. Tell her to bring a camera crew. We'll show the world exactly what corporate negligence looks like when it's killing actual living creatures. As the sick bear was carefully loaded into the transport vehicle, Sophia stood beside the mother bear, an extraordinary tableau that didn't go unnoticed by the gathering crowd. The aged bear, her eyes fixed on her suffering offspring, made no aggressive moves toward the humans working to help him, almost as if she understood their intentions. When Linda Chen arrived with a camera operator from the Tribune, the scene was already powerful enough to break the hardest heart. Wildlife officials in hazmat suits collecting dead animals from around the pond. Dr. Wilson monitoring the tranquilized bear's vital signs as it was prepared for transport. Local children who had come to love the forest through the education center's programs, watching with tears streaming down their faces. But it was Sophia, standing resolute beside the elderly mother bear who had first connected with her 16 years earlier, that made the image unforgettable. 16 years ago, a bear fell into our swimming pool, and a baby's compassion changed how our community sees its relationship with the natural world, Sophia said, looking directly into the camera, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. Today, that same bear's family is being poisoned by chemicals dumped into the creek that provides water for every living thing in these woods. This isn't just an environmental issue. This is about our neighbors, our friends, the creatures who share this land with us. As she spoke, the mother bear made a soft, mournful sound that the microphones captured perfectly. A sound that seemed to underscore Sophia's words with a grief too profound for human language. The footage, broadcast initially on the local news and then picked up by national networks, went viral within hours. The image of Sophia standing beside the bear, speaking with quiet intensity while gesturing to the environmental devastation around them, became instantly iconic, a symbol of humanity's complex relationship with the natural world. Westridge Chemical issued immediate denials, claiming their construction site followed all environmental regulations. But they hadn't counted on the thoroughness of Operation Clear Water. While Sophia had been documenting the effects downstream, Marcus and Emily had indeed taken their drone upstream, capturing clear footage of construction runoff being carelessly channeled directly into the creek. Water samples collected at multiple points provided irrefutable evidence of increasing contamination levels approaching the construction site. The story exploded into a national conversation. Environmental organizations offered legal support and technical expertise. Government agencies, faced with undeniable public pressure, launched expedited investigations, and perhaps most powerfully, people who had been touched by the original story of Sophia and the bear 16 years earlier reconnected through social media, sharing how that moment had changed their own relationship with nature and pledging support for this new chapter in an ongoing saga of compassion and conservation. 3 days after the emergency at the pond, Sophia received a call from the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center where the sick bear had been taken. "He's responding to treatment," the veterinarian told her. "The toxins are being cleared from his system. With continued care, we expect a full recovery." That evening, Sophia returned to the edge of the forest alone. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, she waited quietly, somehow knowing that the mother bear would find her. When the massive shape emerged from the shadows, Sophia could see the toll the past days had taken. The bear moved more slowly, her head hanging with exhaustion and worry. "Your son is getting better," Sophia said softly. "They're helping him, and we're going to make sure this never happens again." The bear huffed softly, then did something unprecedented in all their years of connection. She moved forward until she was just 3 feet from Sophia, then slowly, deliberately lowered her massive body until she was lying on the ground, her head resting on her paws, looking up at the human who had been part of her life for so many years. Understanding the profound gesture of trust, Sophia carefully sat on the ground as well, maintaining the small distance between them that represented mutual respect for their different natures. Together, human and bear sat in companionable silence as darkness settled over the forest. 2 mothers of different species sharing concern for a child and for the future of the home they both cherished. The legal battle that followed was complex and protracted. Westridge Chemical hired aggressive attorneys who challenged the evidence, questioned the methods used to collect it, and even attempted to discredit Sophia herself, suggesting that her documented history of bear communication made her an unreliable witness. But the company had underestimated the power of the story that had united a community 16 years earlier and was now galvanizing a nation. People who had never considered themselves environmentalists found themselves moved by the image of the teenage girl and the elderly bear, standing side by side in what seemed like shared determination to protect their home. 6 months of legal wrangling culminated in a settlement that exceeded even the most optimistic expectations. Westridge Chemical agreed to abandon the research facility project entirely, donating the land to a conservation trust with the stipulation that it would remain protected woodland in perpetuity. Additionally, they committed substantial funds to clean up the contamination and restore the damaged ecosystem. On a bright spring morning, almost exactly 1 year after the bear had first led Sophia to the contaminated creek, a small ceremony was held at the Education Center to commemorate the establishment of the new Clear Water Preserve. Representatives from government agencies, environmental organizations, and community groups gathered alongside the students who had been part of Operation Clear Water and the many neighbors who had supported their efforts. Dr. Martinez, now working on a new book that would document this latest chapter in her ongoing research into human-animal communication, stood beside Sophia as they unveiled a simple stone marker at the trailhead leading into the newly protected land. In honor of a mother bear who taught us to listen, and a child who taught us to care, may the waters run clear and the forest stand strong, a home for all creatures who dwell here. As the applause faded and people began to disperse toward the reception being held on the center's grounds, Sophia slipped away from the crowd, feeling a familiar need to check on her oldest friend. She found the mother bear in a sunny clearing not far from the trail, lying peacefully in a patch of early spring wildflowers. Her grown son, fully recovered from his brush with death, dozed nearby, his massive form rising and falling with each breath. Sophia approached quietly, but the elderly bear's ears twitched, sensing her presence even before she came into view. Raising her graying muzzle, the animal regarded her with eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages. For 16 years, their lives had been interconnected in ways that defied conventional understanding. A bond that had begun with fear, transformed by innocence, that had evolved through shared purpose and mutual respect, that had changed not just their lives, but countless others around them. As Sophia sat on a fallen log nearby, the bear made a soft sound that seemed to carry both acknowledgement and contentment. The threats had been faced together, the battles fought and won. The water ran clear again, the forest was safe, and generations of bears yet unborn would drink from unpolluted streams because of what they had accomplished together. No words were needed between them. In the dappled sunlight of the clearing, with spring unfolding around them in tender green shoots and delicate blossoms, they simply enjoyed each other's presence, a friendship that had begun with a splash of terror and now rested in peaceful companionship. And it occurred to Sophia, as she watched the elderly bear dozing in the sun, that perhaps this was the greatest gift their unique connection had offered. Not just the chance to protect a forest or clean a stream, but the opportunity to truly know another living being across the boundaries of species and language. To recognize the same love, the same fears, the same determination to protect what mattered most. In that recognition lay the seed of a greater healing, not just for a contaminated creek or a poisoned bear, but for the ancient divide between humans and the natural world of which they were, despite all forgetting, still irrevocably apart. 10 years later, 26-year-old Dr. Sophia Dawson stood at a podium in Stockholm, Sweden, preparing to accept the prestigious Environmental Protection Award for her revolutionary work in wildlife communication and conservation. The journey from a suburban backyard to this international stage had been extraordinary by any measure, yet somehow felt like the natural unfolding of a story that had begun with a bear falling into a swimming pool. The audience, scientists, activists, government officials, and journalists from around the world fell silent as she began to speak. "When I was 15 months old," she said, her clear voice carrying through the hall, "a mother bear fell into my family's swimming pool. What happened next has been documented, studied, disputed, and celebrated. Some call it a miracle, others a coincidence, Still others, the natural empathy of a child not yet taught to fear the wild. She paused, looking out at the attentive faces. But the truth is both simpler and more profound than any of these explanations. What happened that day was a moment of recognition. One living being seeing past fear to the heart of another living being's need. It was a connection that transcended the boundaries we imagine separate us from the natural world. On the screen behind her appeared the iconic photograph that had launched her career. 16-year-old Sophia standing beside the elderly mother bear, both of them looking directly at the camera with what appeared to be shared purpose and determination. That bear taught me to listen with more than my ears. She taught me that when we truly pay attention, with our whole hearts open to understanding, we can hear what other species are telling us about the world we share. She touched a small pendant she wore, a simple bear paw print cast in silver, containing within it a tiny vial of clear water from the creek they had fought to save. 7 years ago, that remarkable bear died peacefully in the forest she had always called home. She lived to see her grand cubs born, to drink from clean waters, to know that her home would remain protected for generations to come. And in her final weeks, she allowed me to sit with her, day after day, as she prepared for her journey beyond this world. Sophia's voice grew softer, thick with emotion, yet never faltering. On her last day, as the sun was setting, she placed her paw over my hand, the only time in 20 years of connection that she initiated physical contact. In that moment, I felt her passing to me not just a farewell, but a responsibility, to continue listening, to continue speaking for those whose voices humans have forgotten how to hear. The hall remained utterly silent, captivated by the power of her words and the quiet authority with which she delivered them. The research we're conducting at the Interspecies Communication Institute isn't about teaching animals to understand human language or training them to perform tasks for human benefit. It's about remembering how to understand what they are already telling us, about their needs, about the health of the ecosystems we share, about the impact of human activities on their ability to survive and thrive. She gestured to the screen, which now showed images of researchers working with various species around the world: wolves in Yellowstone, elephants in Kenya, whales in the Arctic, each paired with a human who had demonstrated unusual abilities to connect with them. We've identified over 300 individuals worldwide with enhanced abilities to sense and interpret animal communication. Not mystics or self-proclaimed animal whisperers, but ordinary people, many of them children, who simply haven't lost what might be a natural human capacity for interspecies understanding. She smiled slightly, acknowledging the skepticism that had followed her work since its inception. I'm well aware that many in the scientific community remain unconvinced. The mechanisms behind what we're documenting don't fit neatly into current neurological or psychological frameworks. But the results speak for themselves. Our wildlife monitoring programs have identified environmental threats months before conventional testing would have detected them. Our habitat preservation initiatives have increased endangered species populations by creating environments that truly meet their needs, not just our assumptions about them. Her expression grew more serious. As climate change intensifies and habitats continue to fragment, the ability to truly understand what other species need isn't just a scientific curiosity. It's an essential tool for conservation. We cannot protect what we do not understand, and we cannot understand if we do not listen. She straightened her shoulders, her voice ringing with quiet conviction. The story that began with a bear in a swimming pool and a baby who wasn't afraid continues today in our work. It continues every time a child looks at a wild creature with wonder rather than fear. It continues when we recognize that the boundary between human and animal isn't a wall, but a doorway, one we can choose to walk through with open hearts and minds. As applause filled the hall, Sophia closed her eyes briefly, feeling a familiar presence that transcended physical limitations. The memory of an aged bear with wise eyes who had taught her to listen with her heart. And in that moment it seemed that the bear's spirit was there with her, approving the continuation of a journey they had begun together so many years ago. That night, in her hotel room overlooking Stockholm's glittering waters, Sophia stood at the window and looked up at the stars, thinking about how far she had come from that suburban backyard and the extraordinary connection that had shaped her life's purpose. Her phone chimed with a message. A photo from her parents back at the education center, showing a mother bear with 2 small cubs crossing the meadow at sunset. Not the same bear family she had known throughout her childhood, but descendants, part of a thriving population that now inhabited the protected woodlands. "Your legacy continues," her mother had written below the image. Sophia smiled, touching the bear paw pendant at her throat. The story never really ended, she reflected. It simply evolved, passing from generation to generation, from species to species, weaving connections that transcended time and distance. And perhaps that was the true miracle. Not that a child had once calmed a frightened bear, but that the moment of connection between them had rippled outward through time, transforming fear into understanding, conflict into cooperation, separation into belonging. In a world increasingly divided by fear and misunderstanding, perhaps this was the story that needed telling most of all. That when we listen with our hearts, when we see past our differences to our shared needs and vulnerabilities, we discover that we are never truly separate from the web of life that sustains us all. And it had all begun with a bear who fell into a swimming pool, and a baby who put everyone in tears with the simplest, most profound gift of all, the courage to offer compassion where others saw only fear. 30 years after that fateful day, on the 50th anniversary of Sophia's birth, a special gathering took place at what had now become the International Center for Interspecies Understanding. What had once been a suburban backyard with a swimming pool had expanded over decades to encompass nearly 1,000 acres of protected wilderness, with research facilities, education centers, and carefully designed observation areas where humans could learn from and connect with wildlife in their natural habitats. People had traveled from across the globe to celebrate both Sophia's birthday and the remarkable legacy that had grown from that single moment of connection between a child and a frightened bear. Former students who had gone on to establish similar centers in their own countries. Researchers whose understanding of animal cognition and communication had been transformed by Sophia's groundbreaking work. Children who had grown up reading the illustrated books that told the story of the bear in the swimming pool and the baby who wasn't afraid. As twilight settled over the center's main gathering area, an open-air amphitheater nestled at the edge of the forest, Sophia stood before the assembled crowd, her once honey-brown hair now streaked with dignified silver, her eyes still holding that same quiet wisdom that had marked her since childhood. 50 years ago today, she began, her voice carrying naturally across the hushed audience. I was born into a world where humans and animals were considered fundamentally separate, divided by barriers of language, consciousness, and purpose. Today, we gather in a world where those barriers are being dismantled, not through technology or force, but through the simple, powerful act of listening with our hearts. Behind her, on a massive screen, images from the past 30 years played in silent tribute to the journey they had all shared. The teenage Sophia standing beside the elderly mother bear during the water pollution crisis. Dr. Sophia Dawson accepting her first international award. The establishment of the Interspecies Communication Institute. the groundbreaking research that had identified the neurological pathways that enabled certain humans to perceive and interpret animal communications. The worldwide network of sanctuaries and research centers that now formed a global community dedicated to healing humanity's relationship with the natural world. What began as a moment of crisis, a wild animal trapped in a human environment, a child responding with instinctive compassion, has blossomed into a movement that is changing how we understand our place in the web of life, Sophia continued. Not as masters or managers, but as participants in a conversation as old as life itself. She paused, looking out over the faces illuminated by the soft glow of lanterns as darkness settled more deeply around them. Many of you have asked me over the years what it felt like. That first moment of connection with the bear. Was I afraid? Did I somehow know, even at 15 months old, that this moment would define the course of my life? She smiled, the expression lighting her face with warmth that reached every person present. The truth is both simpler and more profound than that. I wasn't thinking at all in the way adults think. I was simply feeling the bear's fear as if it were my own, responding to her distress with the pure, unfiltered empathy that all children possess before the world teaches them barriers and boundaries and fear. A soft murmur rippled through the audience. Recognition, perhaps, of that lost capacity for connection that many had rediscovered through their work with the center. What I've come to understand over these 50 years, Sophia said, her voice growing softer, compelling them to lean in, to listen more deeply, is that this ability never truly leaves us. It simply goes dormant, buried beneath layers of learned separation and fear. And when we allow ourselves to feel once more, to truly open our hearts to the emotions, needs, and experiences of other living beings, we remember that we have always been part of something greater than ourselves. At the edge of the forest that bordered the amphitheater, movement caught the attention of those seated nearest the trees. Gasps of wonder spread through the crowd as several bears emerged from the shadows. Descendants of that original mother bear who had fallen into a swimming pool 30 years earlier, whose lineage had continued to share these woods with the humans who had learned to respect and protect them. Sophia turned, unsurprised, as if she had been expecting this arrival. One bear in particular, a massive female with intelligent eyes that seemed to hold generations of wisdom, stepped slightly ahead of the others, regarding the assembled humans with calm curiosity rather than fear. "This is Maya," Sophia said softly, though her voice still carried to every person present. "Great-granddaughter of the bear who first taught me to listen. She and her family continue to share their wisdom with us, teaching each new generation of researchers and students how to hear what has always been spoken, if only we had the heart to listen." The bear, as if understanding that she was being introduced, sat down at the forest's edge, her powerful presence a living embodiment of the bridge that had been built between worlds once thought irrevocably separate. "There's a question I'm often asked," Sophia continued, turning back to face the audience, "particularly by skeptics or those encountering our work for the first time. They ask, what do the animals say to you? What great wisdom do they impart?" Her laughter, warm and genuine, rippled through the gathering. The animals don't speak in philosophical treatises or mystical revelations. They speak of what matters most: safety for their young, clean water to drink, forests to roam, the freedom to live according to their nature. They speak of hunger and fear, of joy and play, of connection and belonging. They speak, in essence, of the same fundamental needs and experiences that form the core of human existence as well. She extended her hand toward the bears watching from the forest's edge. And in that recognition lies the most profound truth I've discovered in 50 years of listening. We are not separate from the web of life that sustains us. We have never been separate except in our own minds. The boundaries we've created between human and animal, between civilization and wilderness, between self and other, exist only in our perception, not in reality. Sophia moved across the stage to stand beside a simple stone marker similar to the one that had been placed at the trailhead so many years before, but with new words carved into its surface. She rested her hand upon it as she spoke her final words of the evening. The legacy we celebrate tonight isn't mine. It belongs to a bear who fell into a swimming pool and a baby who reached out in compassion. It belongs to every person who has ever paused to really listen, to really see, to really feel the connection that has always existed between all living beings. And it continues through each of you, through every heart opened, every mind changed, every barrier dissolved through the simple revolutionary act of listening with love. As she finished speaking, something extraordinary happened, something that would be recounted with tears of wonder for years to come. Maya, the great-granddaughter of the original mother bear, rose from her sitting position and made a soft, melodious sound that carried clearly through the hushed gathering. One by one, the other bears joined in, creating a chorus of gentle vocalizations that seemed to embrace the humans present in a moment of shared communication that transcended the need for translation. And then, in a gesture that left even Sophia breathless with wonder, Maya raised her massive paw and placed it over her heart. A gesture she had never been taught, had never been trained to perform, yet one that communicated across the species barrier with unmistakable clarity. Throughout the amphitheater, humans instinctively mirrored the gesture, placing their hands over their own hearts in silent recognition of the profound bond being acknowledged between species. Some wiped away tears. Others simply closed their eyes, absorbing the power of a moment that seemed to exist outside of time itself. As twilight deepened into night, with stars appearing one by one above the gathering, Sophia felt the presence of that first mother bear, not as a memory, but as an ongoing connection that had never truly been broken by death or time. In that moment of silent communion between humans and bears, past and present, she understood that the story had never really been about her at all. It had always been about the possibility that existed in every heart, the possibility of seeing beyond fear to the shared vulnerability and need that connected all living beings. The bears eventually returned to the forest, moving with unhurried dignity back into the shadows from which they had emerged. The humans remained seated in reverent silence for several moments longer, each processing in their own way the extraordinary experience they had just shared. Later that night, long after the celebration had concluded and the guests had departed, Sophia walked alone to the edge of the forest. The moon cast silver light across the meadow where that first miraculous connection had occurred so many years ago. She carried with her a simple wreath of wildflowers gathered from the very spot where the elderly mother bear had lain in her final days. At the base of an ancient oak tree, the place where generations of bears had rubbed their backs and marked their presence, Sophia gently placed the wreath. No words were necessary. The gesture itself was both offering and gratitude, acknowledgement and promise. As she straightened, a soft breeze rustled through the leaves overhead, carrying with it the nighttime sounds of the forest, the gentle symphony of a world continuing its ancient rhythms of life, death, and renewal. And within that symphony, Sophia could still hear the voice that had first taught her to listen, not with her ears, but with her heart. "I heard you," she whispered into the darkness. "I'm still listening. And now, others are listening too." The breeze seemed to strengthen for just a moment, wrapping around her like an embrace before continuing on its path through the trees. Sophia closed her eyes, feeling the boundaries between past and present, between memory and reality, between human and nature, dissolving in a moment of connection that encompassed everything. The frightened bear in a swimming pool, the baby who hadn't learned to fear, the teenage activist standing up for clean water, the scientist receiving accolades in Stockholm, and now the elder celebrating a lifetime of building bridges between worlds once thought forever separate. All of these moments existed simultaneously in the eternal now of genuine connection, a connection that had transformed not just one life or one community, but had sparked a movement that continued to ripple outward, touching heart after heart, dissolving fear after fear, building bridge after bridge. And in that perfect moment of understanding, standing between the worlds of human and wild that she had spent a lifetime connecting, Dr. Sophia Dawson finally grasped the full circle of the journey that had begun when she was too young to even understand what was happening. The tears that slipped down her cheeks were not of sadness or even ordinary joy, but of a completion so perfect that it transcended ordinary emotion. The recognition that what had begun with a bear falling into a swimming pool had never really been about saving the bear at all. It had been about the bear saving her from the forgetting that claimed most humans as they grew, the forgetting of their place in the web of life, the forgetting of how to listen with the heart, and through her, perhaps, helping to save us all. As she turned to walk back toward the center that had grown from that single moment of connection, Sophia felt a peace settle over her that was deeper than any she had known before. The peace of a story not ending, but continuing to unfold through new hearts, new minds, new possibilities for healing. The ancient divide between humans and the natural world of which they had always been and would always be, an inseparable part. Behind her, in the dark of the forest, a mother bear nuzzled her cubs, teaching them in her own way that not all humans were to be feared, that some, the special ones, still remembered how to listen. And a new generation prepared to carry forward a legacy of connection that had begun, improbably and miraculously, with a splash of water and a baby's tears that had put everyone in tears, opening hearts that had forgotten how to feel, teaching minds that had forgotten how to hear, healing a separation that had never truly existed, except in humanity's frightened imagination. The circle was complete. The story continued. And somewhere between the world of humans and the world of bears, in that sacred space where hearts open and boundaries dissolve, both past and future existed in perfect harmony, a harmony of connection, compassion, and the courage to reach across the divides that only fear creates. In the end, that was all it had ever taken, the courage to reach out, to listen, to care, the courage to remember what we have always known in the deepest chambers of our hearts, that we are never truly separate, never truly alone, never truly apart from the magnificent web of life that holds us all in its embrace. And it had all begun with a bear who fell into a swimming pool and a baby who wasn't afraid to listen with her heart.